나도 이제 아주他们的这边继续他不是听过车嘛呗，我的领队
Now we are
第一座
holding
呀，
the
就
ninth
就那边的那
Aryachema spring teachings.
个性那么说的，他那心给
And so
这
at the
么那么
beginning,
说
I'd
的，
like to
呃，
offer my greetings to all
他
of the
那心给这
teachers,
好
to
的，
all of the nuns,
长南区的信息那个的，长路的呀，
as well as to everyone listening
那么
on over the
这心
internet.
别个的，甚至需
So
要
I'd like
经营，
to offer you all a warm and
但这
auspicious
里的
welcome.
呀呢。아니 모두 있잖아. 라망업 집에 가져다 먹고 마셔도 쓰바.
And so we are going to continue with our teachings on the
유사하다.
50
라망업
verses on the Guru.
집에 시급의 금생선보다 얘야
When we
시급
think about
또
the
가리 뭐데
main reasons
기타고만
for why we need to
유서게
teach the
다이네
50 verses on the Guru, of course, we
갸브게
all listen to
순저로
this, but as we're
우주소에
now
인류사네
resuming the
그래
teachings
라마닝게
this
소리야
year,
시
and so I thought that I would
매주 가시 슈비네 아무만로
go over a few
삼시거든
points as a reminder. I thought
단체당기
this would be beneficial.
라마당 계획신이사의 개신부 인백이
Now,
꼬르게
as you all know, the
동안 인게
sutras and
나오네
teachers both
다
speak about the importance of
이전에야
gurus and spiritual
송여기
friends.
동산에기
They
겐신부
speak
집에
about these repeatedly, as you all know,
안타버도 상하가 나로래야
and in particular in the secret mantra.
라마마 덴발래야 지금 라고마다 나다 알아서 봐 다들 되게 배 상하게 냠래
It's often said
계신지
that for the
지터내부터 부르지다 야나
if you do
지금
not
제미
follow guru,
잡아도
you
그래
can't
소리야
meditate on a guru
지금
or recite
샤샤다
mantras. But if you
배차샤비나
don't follow guru, you
상하
won't be able
그러면 나도
to do most
상하
of the practice of the secret mantra.
상하게
You could even say that you wouldn't be
남도
allowed to.
지구로 통마지
For
상하게
example, in the secret
주세
mantra,
따지
the entry to
고원도
the
담아도
path, the
되는
secret
모두
mantra, the
그랬으나
beginning
아니
point or the
왕슈나니 고통도
gateway into
쓰고
it is
아니
that begins with
왕슈비체네 아니다
asking for an
긴고로
empowerment.
나로래야 긴고래야
When you
쇼바
ask for the empowerment,
아니다
then you enter the mandala,
왕슈요 알아봐
and
근데
so you take the
내
empowerment.
왕슈에 거래야 라마
But
매나
when
아니
you take the
왕슈
empowerment,
매지 왕슈스
if you
매버지
don't have a guru, you don't have someone
딘유사네
to give the
라마
empowerment. There's no one to
매니게
receive the
왕슈
empowerment from. So if
상하가
there's no
나로야
guru, there's no way
다다
to take the empower, and there's
다시 라마
no
매베나
and
딱강서
receive the
차네
empowerment, and then it is very difficult
다나
to do the
신기
practice of the
따왕
secret
슈베
mantra.
제레야 다 상하가 도마
Likewise, after you've
모시고나
received the
여러분
empowerment,
되게 자와지네
there are many vows and samayas that are taught, and all of these come
다제네
down to the
아니
guru
모두
fundamentally.
소소기에다
Then,
계속이 냠내 체네
as you do the practice of the
상하가
creation and completion
준비 되네
phrases,
그래야
and you progress
아니다
along the
우리야
path and
계속
the levels.
이름이야 조림이야 리스토리아지
And so if you don't have the
동안
instruction or
모시고요 알아봐
advice on the
대야
creation
지글라메시
completion phases, you need a lot of pith instructions on them. So
냠내
if you don't have
체지
a guru, you won't know
냠내
how to
체
do the practice.
제트 매대 버리지
And so there'll be no way that you'll be able to practice.
tar
Even in
상계부
the end,
대신에야
when you've already
대배
awakened to
라마데
Buddhahood,
주다가 수도
the guru you
지고리아
previously
주다가
followed becomes the lord of your
대다
family, who is above
나버지야
the crown of your head.
제레시기
And so it's
고리아
like, well, we see this with many Buddhas. For example, the Lord of Avalokiteshvara is Amitabha and so forth. And this is because he followed him as his guru when he was training on the path. And so, and even though he is ultimately achieved enlightenment, he appears in the form of a bodhisattva, but above his crown there is the lord of his family, the Amitabha. In any case, if you think about the secret mantra Vajrayana practice, and the beginning, middle, and end, the guru is extremely important. And so for this reason, as it says in text on the root downfalls of the Vajrayana that is attributed to Master Voshko, where it says, because accomplishment of the Vajra holder depends on the master. As this says, the supreme and ordinary accomplishments all depend on the way you follow the guru. If you don't follow a guru, there's no way to achieve the supreme and ordinary accomplishments. And in particular, with our Kagyu tradition, the blessings of the guru are considered extremely important, right? For example, from Mahapandita on down in the Kagyu tradition of Naropa, in particular in the Dapo Kagyu from Gampopa, whether you develop realization and experience or not depends primarily on the blessings of the guru. And the root of the blessings is said to be gurus, as we always say. And so, as it says on Gampopa's Garland of the Amrita of Advice, what it says is that you might have spent many eons striving at keeping your generosity, keeping discipline. You might have developed infinite clairvoyance as miraculous powers. You might have seen the Yidam deity or achieved the city of a lifespan that's as long as the sun and moon. But these are all the cause of Buddhahood. They won't be able to bring you to the other side of samsara. In order to transcend samsara, you need to realize the nature of your own mind. In order to realize the nature of your mind, you don't need spiritual instructions alone will not help. You also need to receive the blessings of a guru who has realization. And so it's not just the lineage of the words, but the lineage of the meaning that is important. A guru who has themselves realized the nature of the mind, and if you receive their blessings, only then will you be able to realize the nature of your own mind. Likewise, the same text also says, the Garland of Advice, says, if you have not received the Guru's blessings, you will need to start this mind essence by looking. You can't catch it by grasping it with your hand, or you can't stop it by blocking. You even think that if you want to eliminate all of your perceptions, you can't discard them or demolish them. Therefore, all those who want to gather the accumulations, prefer the obscurations, pacify obstacles, develop realization in their beings, overwhelm appearances, and perfect the benefit for themselves and others, they have one thing that they need to do, and that is to serve the Guru only and to respect the Guru. There is nothing other to do than to supplicate them. It's saying there's basically nothing else, it says. You need to make the devotion to the Guru like the central aspect of our practice. And so those who have developed realization need to practice like that. And those who have developed realization also should supplicate the Guru over and over again. And not let themselves be distracted, but to nurture the experience of the realization itself. Through this, they'll resolve that their own mind is free of all aberrations, and they'll see that it's like a display or like an illusion and so forth, and they'll actually realize that they have no hopes or fears in samsara, no nirvana. And so for this reason, if we look at the words of the Buddha and the treatises, or if we look at the life stories of the Master of the Past, in particular, if we look at the deeds and lives of the Kagyu Gurus, you see that the following Guru is a really crucial point. And it's also like the characteristic of the Guru that you follow and the manner that you should follow them are something that we absolutely have to understand. And we need to really understand that. So it's critical to understand this. For this reason, many texts of the secret mantra explain that once you have received an empowerment, you should first study and contemplate the 50 verses on the Guru. And the reason for doing so is that all of the common and supreme cities of the secret mantra depend upon following the Guru. And so if you study this, if you don't know how to follow the Guru, if you follow the Guru properly, you'll be able to know how to practice the Guru, the Dharma, and be able to achieve the supreme and ordinary accomplishments. But these people don't really understand what the word Lama or the word Guru means. They just don't understand. Like these days abroad, they say all the monks, or everyone who's wearing red robes, they call them all the Lama. That's the custom there, right? And in particular, it's even scarier than that, is that these people don't know how to distinguish good lamas from bad ones. Or they don't distinguish good lamas from bad ones, and because of this, they're deceived. And this also brings great harms to the teachings and the sentient beings in general. So this does happen, doesn't it? Likewise, these days there are many people who have the names of like a Rinpoche or title. They have these. This I'm thinking primarily about myself. So people like myself, we have the names like titles such as Rinpoche or Tulku. But we ourselves, we don't really know what to do ourselves. We become lamas who can live up to ourselves. We don't know what we should do. So the title is a Rinpoche or Tulku or a Lama, but in actuality, we're not really able to take on the responsibility of a Lama. So this happens quite a bit, doesn't it? Also, there are many people who receive all of the empowerments and teaching and transmissions, as many as they want from the Guru, but they're completely unable to keep the Samaya. And in particular, if they're someone who's in the presence of the Guru, so they go see the Guru and they live with the Guru and they see them every day. And so they only see the Guru as like an ordinary person. And so they don't think of the Guru as being like a Buddha or a Bodhisattva or a spiritual master. And they say many things that are disrespectful and they criticize the Guru. And this happens quite a bit. And so if we think about this in the explanation of the secret mantra, text of the secret mantra, this is absolutely not to go, because this is what it says in the text of the secret mantra, is that if you're disrespectful of the Guru, that you will be incapable of receiving any blessings or qualities in this life. And so in the future lives, you'll be reborn in like the incessant hell and so forth. So it is important for us to understand perfectly well what's meant when you say an authentic guru. How should we pay respect to an authentic guru? How do we follow a guru? How do we can make a good connection with a guru? And so it's very important for us to understand this. So in the future, so right now we're speaking about the 50 verses on the Guru, right? So my plan is that in the future, I'd like to, then now we begin with the 50 verses, and we then move on to then let's teach a little bit about the secret mantra Vajra, and I thought I could tell a bit. So once we finish the 50 verses, then there's the Ranjan Dorje's Ocean of Samaya, so I thought I should teach that. However, as I mentioned earlier, when we're speaking about the texts of the secret mantra Vajra, the first one we should study is the 50 verses of the Guru. And so because that is the tradition, so right now, we will be continuing with this teachings on the 50 verses of the Guru. Now, the point we've come to in the text is what we're speaking about. As we're there, come to the point we're talking about the characteristics of the Guru to follow. When I speak about this, the characteristics of the Guru, there are the characteristics of the Guru to avoid, and the characteristics of the Guru to be followed. So in just basically these 2 points, this is the passage that we're discussing. Now, last year, we discussed the first of these, the characteristics of the Guru to avoid. So today, what we'll begin with and begin teaching on is the characteristics of the Guru to be followed. Now, we talk about the characteristics of the Guru to follow. It's like, well, what kind of a Guru should we follow? This is what we're explaining here. So here, this is what we really have to understand. The most important point is that in general, in the secret mantra, it said that you should think of the Guru as being like an actual Buddha. We consider the Guru to be extremely important. We think of the Guru as really important. We think, oh, if I could only see the Guru. But actually, And so we actually should have the faith in the guru and dedication to the guru as being like the actual Buddha. So this means that we should hold whatever the guru says to be authoritative, and to view whatever they do as excellent. This is very important. But this is something we have to think about. Sometimes what we think is that when we say Buddha, it's something that's like something really far away from us. Because none of us have ever actually met the Buddha. And we only see them in dreams or in visions, but we don't actually see the Buddha. Because the Buddha passed away 2,500 years ago. And so he appeared in the world then, he passed and appeared in Nirvana. And so the Buddha appearing in the world is an event that happened 2,500 years ago. And we weren't born 2,500 years ago. We've only now it's that we've been born. And even our parents, our ancestors had yet to be born. So we were unable to actually meet the Buddha. We didn't have that excellent fortune. However, the way we look at it when we say a Buddha, if the idea of a Buddha, when we think the Buddha is like this, we have an idea of what a Buddha is like. So the primary thing is that we see, like, we've seen a lot of statues or paintings of the Buddha. And so when we say Buddha, when we think about a Buddha, then we think of the statues or the tankas that we see. That's probably what we think of, right? But however, actually, the actual Buddha that we saw was the one who actually was born in India 2,500 years ago was actually a Buddha. He was a prince. He was actually born. And if we think about it, if we had been there 2,500 years ago, we might have met the Buddha. Would have the Buddha been like someone like what we think, someone like this incredible, he's like, it was like a body that was several stories tall? This probably wouldn't seem like that. When we would look at them, we'd probably see like a natural person. Now, among people, we'd probably see it as a pretty handsome person. We'd probably think that a really good-looking person. This is someone who really had a nice face, so they had a really beautiful face. But it wouldn't be like some sort of a Buddha like the way we think, where it's like we wouldn't see a Buddha like the way we think. If we looked, it's like we look to see, the Ushnisha on the top of the head. If we're looking up at the sky and see somebody, sometimes we think that the invisible Ushnisha on top of the head is like difficult to see it, right? So for that reason, actually, the Buddha in actuality is like the guru. He was a spiritual friend. So the Buddha who was actually there was for the people who some was actually like a spiritual friend, like a human. It wasn't like some sort of like incredible being like we have this idea with all these. It's not like this incredible person that we think we'd see. The person is a little bit different. And people see it in different way because of their capabilities. And so people would see the Buddha in different ways. But in general, in terms of the common ways, the person would have appeared as like a lama or like a spiritual friend. So this is something we need to think about it when we have the spiritual friends we actually meet in our own perception. There's no difference between them and the Buddha. The person who teaches us the path of virtues, or the spiritual path, is that type of a person, like the Buddha, the spiritual friend. And so it's important for us to think about it like that. And of course, in general, in the secret Vajrayana, we have to think about the Buddha as an actual guru, and we have to hold whatever they say to be authoritative and view whatever they do as excellent. This is what it says, but we need to understand is that merely having the title of guru does not mean that we have to view them as being a Buddha. So everyone who is called by the title Lama, so there's a Lama over there, there's a Lama this, so-and-so, and there's a Lama there, and there's a this and that over there. So just because they have the title of a Lama doesn't mean that we necessarily have to think that we see them as an actual guru and do everything that they tell us to do. Really saying that someone is a Lama doesn't mean doesn't mean that everything that they do is good, what everything they do, or that everything they do is something you should hold to be authoritative. It doesn't mean that. Likewise, when you say that something's a guru, it doesn't mean that you should follow everyone who is said to be a lama the way Naropa followed Tilopa and Mila followed Marpa. It's really important for us to understand this too. So first of all, we need to examine whether the individual we're thinking of following as a guru is that whether that person has the qualifications that make them worthy of being a guru as taught in the Secret Mantra. So it said that you have to examine this, and all the text of the Secret Mantra doesn't mean that you can't close your minds to just believe they're for a guru and then follow them. It doesn't. That's not at all it. If someone introduces them saying this is a good lama, that's not enough. You also have to yourself, you have to examine and see, is this a good guru or not? This is a guru who has all of the qualities that make them worthy of being a lama or not. And only then, if you do, then you can follow them. You shouldn't just follow what other people say. You can't just listen. You can't, because it's well known. So when you're looking at first section, you have to look for something whether they have them. You have the great, so they're greater and lesser qualities, like there are different substances. We've been talking about there are some of the greater ones, middling ones, and lesser ones. Of course, we can describe them, but at the very minimum, once the minute there comes to the minimum, the bare minimum, so they have to have these qualities. The best, even if you can't find the greatest of gurus, at the very minimum, they have to have these particular qualities. Otherwise, then you shouldn't have them to follow them as a guru. If there's, so it's important to understand what at least the minimum characteristics or qualifications for being a guru are. Think from the perspective of all of us who have the titles of a lama or a tulku. We have to look at ourselves. We have the title of a lama or tulku. And so people will hold us to be a lama, to be a tulku, or to be a spiritual friend. And so we need to examine our own selves. We first have to see ourselves, do we have these minimum qualities for being a guru? And if we don't, then we need to think about what do we need to do to see whether to develop those qualities in ourselves if we're thinking about it in terms of being a lama. If you're thinking about it in terms of the students, you have to look and see whether the guru has whether that guru has the characteristics of a guru taught in the text. Which ones they have and which ones they don't. Instead, you shouldn't just say that they're because they're said to be a lama, that they're known to be, or because someone said this is a good lama. Not just because someone introduced them to you. It's important for your own part to look at them impartially and see whether they have the characteristics of a guru who's taught in the text or not. And so that is very important to do. Now, generally, we think about the characteristics of a lama or a spiritual friend. These are taught in the Foundation Great Vehicles and all of them, the Spiritual Sutras. The Vinaya speaks quite a bit about the characteristics of a lama or spiritual friend. And the Mahayana Sutras also have various descriptions of the characteristics of a spiritual friend. But then, for one perspective, these are not the topic that we have today, and for another perspective, we don't have the time to speak about those, so I won't say too much about them. Now, within the tantras of the Secret Mantra, there are quite a few. Now, they're scattered throughout the different tantras. So some are taught in this tantra, some are taught in the other tantra. They're kind of scattered all through. They're kind of in many different areas. Because of if we take the essence of all these and combine them all, then the text that does that is this 50 verses on the Guru. And so for these characters of the Guru that are kind of like the essential component of the essence, looking at that. If you want to go and look and read and see what's taught in the Sutra, then there are many tantras of the Secret Mantra. There's so many different tantras. And what's taught in them, they're all scattered all about. They're not. So it's difficult to combine them all into a single thing. And so for that reason, they're the characteristics that are taught in the 50 verses in the Guru. They gather these all in one place. And so So these characteristics that are taught in the 50 verses, if we know them well, then we can have a good summary of the characteristics of the gurus that are taught in the secret mantra. Now, there are two stanzas in the 50 verses on the guru that teach the characteristics of a guru. So there are these two characteristics, and of these two characteristics, now there are many different commentaries, and among them there is one that's in the Tenjuru that was translated by Guru Lodsawa Shunupal. And so this is called the textual explanation of following the guru. And so this is a Sanskrit commentary on the 50 verses. This is the only one. And what it says in this commentary is, it gives these two characteristics on the stanzas. So the first teaches the general characteristics of a guru, and the second teaches the specific characteristics of a guru. Lord Tsongkhapa's commentary on the 50 verses of the guru, it does not really make the difference between the common and the particular characteristics. In general, he says that he probably had not read the Sanskrit commentaries. Perhaps it had not yet been translated at that time, or perhaps Lord Tsongkhapa was not able to get a copy of that. But he probably did not read that character. So Lord Tsongkhapa, in his commentary on this, does not seem to divide into the common and the particular characteristics as they are in that. He says that the characteristics of the guru taught in the 50 verses on the guru are according to the attention of the Tantra and the net of illusion. Jomgon Lodotaya also teaches it slightly differently, in saying so it's kind of similar to the Sanskrit Karma. So there's a little difference. So how do we say? It's similar in distinguishing between common and specific characteristics. But if one teaches it in detail, he says that the first two lines of the first teaches the common characteristics, and the rest teaches the specific characteristics. So for that, and the Jamgon Kota Lodotai's way of explaining it is a little bit different. Similarly, there are different ways to count the characteristics. For example, Tsachen Losok Gyatso has a commentary on the 50 verses of the Guru titled Opening the Gateway to Precious City. And there's the explanation, the treasure knowledge. These say that there are 6 common characteristics and 9 specific characteristics for a total of 15. But in brief, we don't need to talk about all these differences at the moment. The main point about it is that if you're a master of the secret Vajra or a guru of the secret Vajra, you need to have, even if you don't distinguish the common and specific characters, there are these characteristics that you must have. And I think it's okay for us to understand that. Even if we can't distinguish between the common and the specific, it's okay. We can think of the characteristics that these are the characteristics that a master of the secret mantra Vajrayana must have. And so we need to know these, and I think it's enough to understand it. So today I would like to speak out the first of these 2 stanzas. So here's the first. A master should be steadfast, subdued, intelligent, patient, upright, honest, skilled in the use of mantra and tantra, compassionate, and learned in treatises. This is the first stanza. Now, I think it's perhaps better to look at this. What it says here is that if we talk about in terms of talking about the textual explanation of these, talk about the 9 common characteristics. So what they are is, first is that they're steadfast or steady, and subdued is the second. The third is that they must be intelligent. The fourth is they must be patient. The fifth is being upright. The sixth is being honest. Being skilled in the use of mantra and tantra is the seventh. Being compassionate is the eighth. And being learned in the treatises is the ninth. So being steadfast is one, being subdued is two, being intelligent is the third, being patient is the fourth, being upright is the fifth, being honest is the sixth, being skilled in the use of mantra and tantra is the seventh, being compassionate is the eighth, being learned in the treatises is the ninth. These are the 9 characteristics. So these are the 9 characteristics. So if we think about the first of these is being steadfast. Steadfastness. So what it says in the textual commentary, that is the Sanskrit commentary, it says, because they hold strongly with their intentions and minds, they are steadfast. So holding strongly here means basically, it's very similar, I think, to what Jetsun Dapachasan says in his commentary. It says that they're imperturbable in their body, speech, and mind. They're very stable. They don't get they're not hectic. They're not dependent on conditions. They're always very stable and steadfast. So in brief, the guru should be stable. You have to be steadfast or stable. They should have a very stable character. Someone you can trust. It's not like they're upset by circumstances. They're just very simple. They have really some solid, stiffness. And you need that, right? Because if you're refuge in this and future lives, you need a steadfast, a stable person. And if they're not stable, they can. If you ask them to do this and they're not stable, then how can they do it? Forget about it. If they forget about it, you need to have a stable friends. You need to have steadfast. And if your friends are kind of fickle and or sometimes there, not time there, that gives us a lot of problems, right? And like when you're doing business, your business partners, the people, need to be someone that this business person can trust, not someone who does various things. It gives you difficulties, right? There should be something like this. The guru should be someone who has a really stable character. And in addition to that, they should be in addition to being stable, in terms of the Dharma, they should have like a stable faith, a stable wish for liberation. These intentions should be really stable. And their affection for the students should be really stable. It's like liking their students one day and not liking them. They shouldn't be changing like that. They shouldn't be fickle. It's like they have the student touching. And they have a student who has a lobsang. And then their lobsang makes a friend and says various, and then all of a sudden the Lama stops and gets unhappy with touching. That does sometimes happen, right? But it shouldn't be like that. Instead, it shouldn't be someone that changes on a dime like that. It should be, the Lama should be very stable in their mind. And if the guru is stable, then the student can have really stable, developed confidence. And so what it says in this is, Gampopa says in his garland of the Amrita advice, is that in the past, it's like after Rijjhara had gone to India once and came back, he went to India a few times, right? So when he came back from India, Rijjhara asked his guru, said, "How are you doing?" He said, he also greeted them. Said, "How are you doing?" And he said to the person, "Have you had any obstacles in your spiritual practice?" He said, "Have you had any obstacles in your practice of the Dharma?" And then what Milarepa said was, "So how could I have any obstacles? Why would I have any obstacles?" said Milarepa. So Milarepa said like that. So I was wondering, why is it that the guru has no obstacles? And then Milarepa said, I've never listened to whatever said. I just don't listen to what people say. So how can I have any obstacles? I never let myself listen to what people say. I never let myself get fooled or deceived by other people. I just don't worry about it. I just don't listen to all of their gossip. I never follow the gossip. That's what it says. So in general, whether it's someone who's practicing the Dharma, particular whether it's someone, a guru and a spiritual friend, you have to have a really stable character. You have to be someone who's really steadfast, stable. So you shouldn't be someone who's like able to be influenced by other people, who should be easily fooled by other people. So you have to be stable. So the second is being subdued. So being subdued, what it says in the textual commentary, that's the Sanskrit, it says, subdued means like according to the Vinaya. What this means, if you look at this, what it means is, so you have to be very peaceful and subdued according to the Dharma. You shouldn't be someone who's kind of rough in your characters. Someone whom when you see them, they're like peaceful and subdued. They have that appearance of being peaceful. That's what they should be like. Jetsun Dabi Jetsun writes, subdued means that their mind is trained. They have the training of the mind, so their mind is subdued. So he's explained it so that they've tamed their own beings, or subdued their own beings. When you think about the characteristics of the spiritual friend in the Mahayana, what it says in the Mahayana Sutras, the spiritual friend is subdued, peaceful, and pacified. Now, there are many different ways to explain this and combining it with the three superior trainings, but the main point, we don't need to explain much of the main point, is that the guru has to be subdued in their own being. So there should be someone who's able to tame their own being. This is really important. According to Buddha, this is really important. The reason why is if you're not able to subdue your own being, how can you tame other people's beings? And so their own beings should not be rough or harsh or they shouldn't be someone who's unable to control themselves. If someone is not able to direct themselves, and someone is like always following their afflictions in the wrong direction, that's not really okay. They must not be. They have to be able to tame their own beings so they don't follow their bad characters, or the bad parts of the character. And so this is what, as Shapara Tsoturantro wrote, is that if you're not tamed your own beings, bad thoughts internally, a few little worlds of increased greed and aversion, this is because of the afflictions. Bless this beggar to subdue the afflictions. Because they haven't tamed their own being. If someone says just a few words, then immediately their blood pressure rises and they get angry about this. And what this shows is that they're unable to tame their own afflictions, or unable to subdue their own character. And so there's another story about another example of that. And this is taught in the Blue Annals. What it says there is that when Gampopa had Gampopa's older brother had three. The first was Dapo Kaji, and the third was Dapo Kompochum. He had three different students. So he had three different nephews. And so the first was Dapo Komsus. So he was a nephew of this. So first of all, there's Gampopa, and then there is nephew Dapo Komsu. And while during the life of Gampopa, all of Gampopa's students saw that Dapo Komsu followed him as a guru, as inseparable from Gampopa. So now Dapo Komsu went to a place to teach the public in a place called Nyamoka. And he was there, and he was teaching the Dharma that there are two sponsors who got in a fight. It's like they were about to budget. They were yelling at each other. And Gamsolo, when he saw this, it really depressed him. And so he said, there's a student of Gampopa called Dapo Juzan. He said, come here, he said. And he said to Dapo Juzan, in the future, I'm not going to teach Dharma in the future. I just can't do it. I can't teach the practice. There's no point to it. And I confess what I did in the past. All mistakes, I make a confession of that. Now in the future, you will have to take care of this Dapo monster. And when he said this, then Dapo Juzan said, oh, please don't do this. Please don't say this. Teaching the Dharma in public is, you should continue to teach the Dharma in public to the people. and he precipitated it, but Gomsul didn't accept it. And he thought to himself, well, how am I possibly going to be able to? So Dapo Duzin thought about, how am I going to be able to hold the seat? And so he thought about this. And I was thinking about that. There's not many years, not after not such a long time, Gomsul passed away. And after Gomsul passed away, his younger nephew was Dapo Gomchung. So Dapo Gomchung was able to hold the monastic seat of the monastery for 2 years. But then after that, he probably passed away. Now, there are many other great scholars, but none of them. But they entrusted the monastic seat to Dapo Duzin, told it to take care of it. And at that time, when he was at the monastery, it's kind of difficult. He had a lot of problems when he was doing it. The monks didn't really think about him. They kind of went all over. They didn't stay at the Dala Kampo. They went to all these different areas. And it was rather difficult for him. And because he was having such difficulties, and what Dapo Duzin thought to himself was, he thought to himself, the reason why it's having such problems, why no one is staying here and everyone's going away and why I'm able to nurture any students is because I haven't done enough virtuous practice. Because I haven't practiced, this has happened. And then because of thinking about it, he spent 8 years in a retreat. He spent 8 years practicing one-pointedly. Because of that, then after 8 years, then many monks came to many other students. He was able to gather many other students. And Dikon Chichen Sultan also praised Dapo Duzin extremely highly. So this is like an example of it. But actually, if you think about it, he was a student of the master and students. He was a student of Gampopa and of Gomsul and of Gomchung, the student of all 3 of them. And this is the way he thought about it. And so this is something that, his is an example we need to leave from it. So what he thought about it is that the monks aren't listening to me. And if I'm teaching them, if not able to gather them, this is probably, it's not that he didn't think they're not listening to me, and he didn't blame them for them. Instead, he looked at himself. He said, they're not listening to me. The other people aren't listening to me, and I'm not able to do that. And the reason is because I have not tamed my own being. And it's because I haven't done the practice. This is because of that. And so he's focused pointedly on subduing his own being. And only then was he able to subdue other people's beings. So this is a really important point. The third characteristic is being intelligent. Now, what it says on the textual commentary and following the Guru, the Sanskrit commentary, is that intelligence means discernment, it says. It's because of having the prajna of being able to diligent that they're called intelligent, meaning that they're discernant. Lord Tsongkhapa says that the intelligent means that they're great prajna. The seventh Karmapa Chodagyatso also writes that intelligent means that the prajna should examine the good and bad. They have to have this sort of prajna. So, for example, if you think about the common vehicles of the characteristics of the guru or the spiritual friend in the common vehicles, in particular, the characteristics of Khyentse, it says that they show them to be both subdued and learned. So being stable. So this being stable means that they're stable and they're able to practice the Vinaya, and being learned means that they have intelligence, Likewise, Tsongkhapa says in his commentary on the 50 verses of the Guru, is that he explains is that at this point he says that stable, the steadfast means that their bodies respond. Subdued means they restrain in speech. Being intelligent means that they're free of guile and that they're restrained in their minds. There's a Master Kunga Nyingpa explains this in the commentary of the Net of Illusion. And so this is the way we need to understand it. We need to join it to the body, speech, and mind. Restraint of the body, restraint of the speech, and restraint of the mind. This is how he explains it. Now, the fourth is being patient. So being patient means, what it says in the textual commentary on following the gurus is that patient means being forbearing, the patience of disregarding suffering, the patience of accepting harm from others, the patience of contemplating the Dharma. So these are all three of the types of patience. Drapa Gyaltsen writes, being patient means being patient of the gurus and students' actions and turning away from anger. Because there are many difficulties in dealing with this, is being able to be patient, forbearing with all of these. And even when students are unruly and disrespectful, it's being able to be, so not to get angry even when that happens. So this is important. Likewise, when you think about the characteristics of the spiritual master, what the ornament of the Mantra Sutra says, follow someone with a loving character who has given up weariness. Being a loving character has given up this. This means that when they don't consider offerings or respect when they teach the Dharma, but they teach from compassion, have a loving character. And they're not wearied by explaining something over and over again. And they're patient with the angry and so forth. In brief, so someone who's a spiritual friend or a guru should be able to up with the difficulties when doing things for students' sake and be able to accept what happens. This is what they should be like. Now, the fifth is being upright. So upright here means, what it says in the textual commentary on the following the guru, says they have a view with no guile. Drapa Gyaltsen says the upright prevents this character in the positive direction. So upright is talking about this in the affirmative. Below we have the honest or being guileless, and this is talking about the nisi. So this is a different way. So upright is present of the pattern, and below where it says that this is guileless or honest, it means that they're talking about the negative. So it's also related to the sixth, which is being guileless. What it says in the textual commentary is that being guileless means having no guile. It's like as guile is cognition, the message for hiding one's own faults. It's a mind that's not honest. So this is what we call is deceit or guile. Jetsun Drapa Gyaltsen stressed that deceit and guile is a teaching is in the negative. So guile is the guile of a mind that's trying to hide one's own faults. That's what we should have said. So deceit here means that someone who has the wish intention to deceive somebody. The first, the guile means trying to hide your own faults. Deceit means to try to fool other beings. And so this is also the opposite of these is being honest or upright. So being upright and guileless, honest and guileless are like, think about it. Guileless is presenting in the negative, and honest is presenting it in the positive. The seventh is being skilled in the use of the mantra and tantra. What it says in the textual mantra, it talks about the three types, like the root mantras, the extracted mantras, and the ascended. The tantras are such as the wheel of repulsion and so forth. And the uses of them are the activities of pacifying and splitting. So the usages are the activities of pacifying and so forth. If we know those, then if you know how to do this, you're skilled in the activities of mantra and tantra. Jetsun Drapa Gyaltsen says mantra means the four activities of peaceful, nurturing, magnetizing, and so forth of the mantra. And tantra means like the practice of the six, the tantra, the six extremes, the six instructions, the five aspects, and so forth. Lord Tsongkhapa writes is that the commentary on Zen Evolution by Konglen Yinpo says that being skilled in the use of mantra and tantra says being able to use the activities of the mantra and medicine to be able to block. In the commentary on the 32nd chapter of the Vajradhakini Tantra, Bhavabhadra says mantras like the 8 feet and so forth. Tantra means medicines. The usages are the rituals of the substances and of the substances of mantras. And so using the mantras for the activities of for doing something by peaceful, enriching, magnetizing, or wrathful means. So the eighth of these is being compassionate. So being compassionate here, according to the textual commentary and following the Guru, says means that compassion means having compassion for all sentient beings. So in general, being compassionate is taught in all of the things from the sutras, from the Vinaya all the way up to the Tantras. It's like a characteristic, the facet of the characters of a teacher in all of these. In the 300 verses of the Vajrayana, it's having compassion for the sick is an important characteristic. Likewise, the ornament of the Vajrayana says, as I mentioned above, follow the Guru with a loving character who's given up the weariness. So the Guru and spiritual friend should be something with a loving character. In particular, it is important for a Guru and spiritual friend to have compassion for any sentient being, no matter who they are, but especially for their own students. What Gampopa says in one of his Dharma talks is saying that among the 10 trainings, that having compassion for others, the way he explained it is that this means that individuals who care for you lovingly are rare. Individuals who care for people with love are very rare. So Gampopa speaks about different characteristics of beings. Like the characters who have 2 or 3 or 4 characters. He speaks about different characters. But when he's thinking about the 3 Gurus having 3 characters, at that point, what Gampopa said is that one of them is that from their out of their compassion, a Guru must never forsake their students. Is what he says. I think the first of these, so the first facet is that they should be not dependent on this life. The second is that they should never forsake their Guru out of compassion. And the third is that they, with their great progeny, they should be able to guide people down the path. And so when he says that out of their compassion, a Guru must never forsake their students, the way Dosek Chimpa explained it in one of the star expansions is this. We're talking about the main point here is that if they lack compassion, then when they have a little bit of a problem, a little bit of suffering, they think, I'm going to be able to care for the students. And they'll get discouraged and think they'll be able to care for people around them. And of course, we have contentious sentient beings of someone who is kind of unruly or a bit difficult. And it's kind of difficult. They think to themselves, I've tried to teach them this Dharma, I've tried to do this, but saying all these important words, I've worked hard for them. But they're saying all these things to me. And sometimes there's danger that they'll feel like they can't bear it. And if you have these kind of unruly students, these really bad students, if you don't have compassion, so you can think, I've given you Dharma, I've worked hard for you, but you see these people aren't listening to me. I'm like, I don't care what happens to them, but I can't take care of them at all. And you think that the student, there's the danger that the Guru will give up completely on their students and forget about them. Even if they have just a little bit of compassion, what happens is that you won't be able to, you won't do anything to care for your students, like when they get sick, if they're suffering. Because sometimes, the sick people are really good. And particularly if you have to act as a nurse for the sick, that's going to be really hard. So when the students are having difficulties, such as an illness, you might think to yourself, it's really difficult, there's a problem. This is so annoying. Don't let them come anywhere near me. Don't come up with it. It's something you might think about that. But it shouldn't be like that. The guru must feel such great passion that even at the cost of their own life, they'll do anything to prevent the students who place their trust in them from going to the lower realms. Even if it's the cost of their own life, so this is my student, I'll do whatever I can for them. I'm not going to let my students go to the lower realms, even if it costs my own life. This is the sort of compassion that the guru should have. If you don't have that, it's not okay. That's what it is, right? When we look at the life stories of the gurus, we think about gurus have held gurus who hold their students in their hearts. And because they hold the students in their heart, they've been able to bless for them and care of them. Likewise, in our guru yogas and our calling the guru to fire and all of these other supplications, when we supplicate, we say, the guru knows. So view me with compassion, guru. Care for me, guru. We have many supplications like this, right? As because of the compassion of the guru. It shows how important it is to have for the guru to have compassion for the students. In particular, if the guru themselves have compassion for the benefit, this will naturally also have the characteristics of being honest and guileless and so forth. Because if you have compassion for someone, you're not going to fool them. If you don't have any compassion for them, it's possible that you might try to fool them. It's possible, right? So if they have that compassion, all the other characters we've spoken of being upright and guileless and so forth will naturally happen. And so Karmapa Dorje wrote about this in his 100 Short Instructions, what he says. I think it's okay to just give the main point. So these days there are some lamas who so they don't let they want to use the students to do misdeeds, and they don't want to use them for virtue. They make them do misdeeds. And in order to do this, what the guru says, oh, you have to do whatever the guru says, they say. They explain this. They give a kind of a foolish explanation of this, and in the end, and they kind of disturb them. They explain this a lot. They kind of brainwash them, so you have to do whatever the guru says. If you don't do it, it's not okay to do what the guru, to not do what the guru says. And they give these many bad explanations and instructions. So first of all, the teacher says you have to do whatever the teacher says. In the end, they make the guru accumulate misdeeds. There are a lot of people like this. So in brief, some gurus take the students who place their hopes in them. They don't let them do things that'll gather they consider it's more important for them to do things that make it possible for them to do. They forget. They don't think that teaching the Dharma, they like having them sew their robes is more important. It's like even making the thread to sew their clothes is more important. They don't let them practice Dharma first, but instead they make them do thread first. They have them do that first. And so there are such gurus as that. And the way those gurus think about the people who rely on them is completely mistaken. That's what he says. So this is another thing that we need to consider. Now the ninth is being learned in the treatises. Now what it says in the textual commentary on following the gurus is that being learned in the treatises means that they're being learned in the 12 types of treatises on Dharma and scholarly and so forth. It gives 12 different types. Now we don't need to go through all of those. This is not well known. He's speaking about 12 different types of treatises, so you have to be these are not the generally known ones. Jessen Drapa Gyaltsen writes that being learned in the treatises mean either the sutras or the treatises of Prajnaparamita. So basically being learned in the treatises means not only the mantra, but also the treatises of the sutras. You have to have a fair degree of learning of these as well. That's how I explain it. The seventh Karmapa Chudajasa writes that says that being skilled and learned in the 10 in the treatises means knowing the 10 areas of knowledge, the 3 Pitakas, the 4 classes of Tantra, and so forth. Tsongkhapa writes that says that being learned in the treatises means that as it says in the Vajrapanjara, it says knowing being learned in all areas of knowledge. So this means to know the 3 baskets of Buddha knowledge and so forth. So it says you have to be knowledgeable about the 3 baskets. So in brief, being learned in the treatises, it means that the best of all, it means knowing the 10 areas of knowledge. And if not, knowing the text and the commentaries of the both Sutra and Tantra, have some degree of knowledge of all those. This is basically what it means. So in brief, it's being understanding what the meaning of the Buddha's sutras and words, and knowing what is said in the teachings, to be able to understand this to a certain degree. In any case, if there's the teachers who are speaking the secret Vajrayana, because they're teachers of the secret Vajrayana, it's unnecessary to mention that they need to be able to teach the secret Vajrayana. They also have some sort of basic knowledge of the ground path and fruition of the great foundation vehicles. They need at least a basic knowledge, and if they don't have that, then it'll be difficult for them to care for their students. But Gampopa, what he said, speaking about the characteristics of the Guru, what he says, so they must guide others along the path with great project. This is what he said. And in explaining this, then what Tusun Khenpa said was that, let's speak of the meaning of this. If you don't have any prajna, what happens is that the master won't know how to teach the Dharma that actually is appropriate for the student's mind. The reason for this is because different students have many different inclinations. They have different ideas. They have the different things that they like. They have things that they're more interested in. And because they have many different interests, in order to be able to benefit Sanchim, you need to be able to teach the student, be able to teach it. For those who are interested in the foundation field, you need to be able to teach them the foundation field. For those who are interested in the Mahayana, you should be able to teach them that. If they're going to be interested in the secret mantra Vajrayana, you need to be able to teach them the secret mantra. Likewise, it said that if Maitreya said that if they do not become learned in the 5 areas of knowledge, even supreme normal beings will not achieve omniscience. Lord Atisha also said, in this brief momentary life of ours, we don't have the time to be able to hear the many different treatises on non-Buddhist subjects such as grammar. We don't have the leisure to study them. But what's most important is that we study the many treatises on Buddhist topics. So the best is if they can able to study someone who knows all the areas of knowledge. If that does not happen, at least someone who has a certain degree of knowledge of all the different treatises of the Buddhism. If it's following someone who's always saying, I don't know, when you're asking a question, that's not okay. If you say, oh, please teach me this one, oh, I don't know that. Then please give me this Dharma. Oh, I've never studied that, I can't teach that. If they're always saying, I don't know, I can't do that. That's not a concern. And so it's important that they be someone who is able to guide others along the path with great prajna. So no matter what they're talking, whatever someone's interested in, there should be that type of Dharma to them and be able to guide them on the path of that Dharma. And so for that reason, so these are the 9 characteristics that are taught in the 8th. So it says that these are the overall characteristics. When you think about the difference between the general and the specific characteristics, there's a little bit of a difference in terms of what do you think about the general characteristics? What do you mean? What do you mean by the specific characteristics? This is, and there's something to speak about that, so I will speak about that tomorrow. So I think that is enough for this evening. Thank you very much.